Thank you very much, Hazel. Yes, good afternoon, everybody. Paddy Shepherd, Senior AI Specialist at Jisc, and I'll be delivering the session to you. And as we say, it's for the Northern Ireland colleges. If you've been to one of my sessions before, you may have seen some little parts of this, but I have tried to include more around FE and in particular at this time of the year as well. So this session is really the getting started with generative AI in education. Let me just make sure my screen, there we go. Just a very quick overview about what the team, the artificial intelligence team, does at Jisc. We run a number of tools and pilots. So what we'll do is we'll take an AI tool and we'll run a pilot. Maybe one of, I know that we've had a couple of Northern Ireland colleges involved in our pilots with Teachermatic, for example. We also try to provide as much advice and guidance and then training. So this falls under the training umbrella. We also have two community groups, which I'll speak to in a second, but I know some people are members as well. And then we speak at a number of external events as well. I mentioned those two community groups. I'm going to share the links to these later on, but we also have two online learning modules. And we're just updating at the moment the Artificial Intelligence and Ethics online module. And then over the summer, I'll update the An Introduction to Generative AI in Education module as well. And they're about 1 hour long, or 30 minutes to an hour, depends on how much time you'd like to spend on them. And they're all online and you can sign up and then you've got a month to complete it. And you get to chat with other people as well and learn through the process. So they're two online ones that you can do at your own leisure, as it were. So in this session, we're going to actually look at understanding the fundamentals of generative AI. So we're going to look at what it is and how it works. We're going to have a quick look at prompting as well, because it's quite important really with the prompting and the way that we use it. And then have a think about a few practical applications as well. Tomorrow's session will have a lot more, we'll have a more in-depth look at actual practical things that you can do.
There's a bit from there too.
Say that again, sorry, just had somebody.
At the top of the microwave. Some of them tubs, right?
Yeah, we will have questions as well, so don't worry at all. But if just keep it on mute just for a little bit, that'd be great, just so I can keep on track. But I've got a quick Slido poll for you, just to see where you feel you're at the moment. Now, this is ever changing for me, but I've got two questions. How would you rate your understanding of generative AI, and what types of tasks are you using for generative AI? So I've popped it in the chat, and hopefully you can see it. And there's a link to a Slido, so hopefully you'll be able to just jump over to there. So let me just open the first question. I think people are already heading over there. The link's in the chat, as I say, and the code is 2863510. Are you a complete beginner, a dabbler, reasonably confident, or an expert? It's just to get a balance of where people are at. Dabbler, reasonably confident, complete beginner. Yeah, I think there's always a mix, isn't there? And we may be stronger at, for example, creating text, creating written content versus images and videos and things like that. So it does always depend on the tool we've got access to, and how we're using it as well. Excellent. Okay. So we've got, if that's fine, pop it in the chat. I will highlight as well, we have the chat open and the Q&A open. So give us a chance just to look through the two of them, just to highlight that, Hazel, as well, just in case. So dabblers, complete beginners, reasonably confident. So hopefully today's session, there's going to be some interesting content then for you. And as it really is an overview of generative AI and certainly how it's hitting us. So I'll ask the next question, as we've got quite a few responses in there. And the next question is, what types of tasks are you using generative AI for? Thank you for those in the chat so I can see. I think everybody's in the right place as well, looking at those responses, which is good. So what types of tasks are you using generative AI for? Not at the moment, fair enough. We're in the right place, AI literacy. So event names, session descriptions, writing emails, presentations, reports, content creation. It's good, isn't it? For those sorts of tasks, creating presentations, generate interview questions, sample CVs. I have to say, certainly generative AI has picked up the recruitment process and people applying for jobs and impacting that area quite a bit, as well as education and assessment. dictionary, general fact check, emails, fair enough, content, not yet. Learning, minutes, suggestions, emails. So looking at these tasks, and the way I kind of explain it quite often is generative AI is quite good at getting us started. It's quite good as an assistant. It's quite useful at starting with those presentation ideas, writing suggestions around emails. But at the end of the day, the human then gets involved and has to proofread and check that that email is saying what they want it to say. And then when they press send, obviously they're responsible for it. I think a good way to frame generative AI in particular in education, it's quite good at helping us get started at those starting points. The human gets involved in the middle part, and then we might use it for proofreading at the end. But again, we would need to check that. But it's quite good as an assistant, and that's certainly the way that Jisc looks at it, and certainly a good way to view it. Rather than trusting everything it does, just use it as an assistant. Lots of really quite vast use cases there as well, actually. Blank page syndrome, absolutely. Excellent, lovely. So thank you very much for those. We'll jump back over to the presentation, but do feel free to put some more answers in, and thank you for those as well in the quiz questions as well. So really looking at what is AI, getting an understanding of this in this first segment, we're going to look at really what is AI and also what is generative AI. So I've got a definition here. Artificial intelligence over on the left-hand side here, it says machines or software that perform tasks normally performed by human intelligence, especially when machines learn how to do those tasks. So that might be something like where you're asking Siri about what the weather is, or a prediction on Netflix, and you've got a suggested something that you might be interested in. Whereas generative AI, which is obviously the one that's been hitting the media for the last couple of years, generative AI is an artificial intelligence system that generates text, images, audio, video, or other media in response to a user's prompt. So that word prompt, that is really the way we interact. So that's where I type in something, or I use the microphone and speak, and it will turn it into text. And input a prompt. Please create me a lesson plan based on this subject. So that's what this the simple term of prompt. That's what it means. So we use that, and we use the prompt word. Doesn't matter which system we're using. Microsoft Copilot, ChatGPT, Google Gemini. That's the input that we're putting. There are different types of AI that exist, and some have existed for quite some time now. We've got forecasting and predictions up in the top left here. And this is where, given a set of data, it will predict, for example, how a student might progress or how financial markets might change. Forecasting and prediction artificial intelligence has been around for a number of years. Banks have used it, for example, credit ratings, all those sorts of numbers that go in and then predict. That's what the version of AI that it's using. There's also, on the top right-hand side, anomaly detection models, so AI to spot fraud or other outliner type activities. So computer vision models, such as recognizing images, so facial recognition on your phone to open it up will be a version of AI, a type of AI. So these are really to try and predict, but also try and spot, try and spot fraud. So in activity on a bank account that isn't normal, that isn't the normal pattern, and it's looking at the patterns. Then we have the recommendation systems at the bottom here. In the blue, collaborative filtering. What would you like in it? What would users similarly like, for example? So that's the Netflix example where it will suggest what else you might like, or other platforms. Content-based filtering, I like that, and this is similar. So that might be where you're on online shopping, so Amazon, for example, and you buy some nails, and then suddenly it's offering you some hammers. It's that recommendation that AI is working towards in the background. And then we have generative AI, which is a large language model. So this is where it's a big, huge model, and you can ask a prompt and you can ask it a question and it will return with a result. And then we also have image generation and voice generation and so on. So again, all the generative AI models work by giving an instruction, which is the prompt. It will generate content, and then we'll obviously review it. So thinking about generative AI in a little bit of a deeper dive now, in 4 bullet points. Generative AI and large language models like ChatGPT, Microsoft Copilot are trained on large chunks of the internet plus some books. So the data that goes into them is trained on quite a vast amount of data. Humans then help, once this data's gone in, humans will then help the training process by providing feedback. They will sit there and they will ask questions and then review the answer, so they'll prompt and say, give me an answer to this, and then they will then review whether that's right or wrong, or if it's a useful output. Now, chatbots then work by predicting the next word given in a sequence of words. So for example, Monday, Tuesday, and it will predict Wednesday based on the data that it has. It doesn't know whether that's the right answer, whether it will be Wednesday after Tuesday, but it works by predicting in that way. Some, but not all, have got access to the internet to help them answer queries as well. So previously, when you first signed up for ChatGPT a couple of years ago, and certainly the free versions, many didn't have access to the internet. So if you asked who the Prime Minister was, or you know, a public affairs kind of question, it wouldn't have that information around the media and the news because it only had the data that it was trained on. Whereas the majority now do have access to the internet, so they're able to answer more up-to-date questions. I think there's been a real shift in the timeline of key events. If we think back to November 2022, so around here, that's when AI really started to hit the media and the news, and we were becoming a lot more aware of it. But actually, generative AI is older technology. In 2018, GPT-1 was actually first released following a research paper the previous year. And in 2018, the first version was made available to the public. It wasn't great at that point. So if you ask questions, it wasn't necessarily particularly useful. However, over time, they've become much more useful. Then in 2021, we can see that DALL-E in the purple color here entered the market. And this is an image generating tool. So please create an image of a cat, for example, and it would create an image of a cat. They weren't great images then, but certainly more recently, they're becoming harder and harder to tell which is AI and which is not. And then we saw in 2022 and 2023 and last year as well, a number of new chatbots or different providers offering their large language models. Interestingly, many have changed names quite a few times. So ChatGPT is the same, but Google Bard is now Google Gemini. Microsoft Copilot was previously Bing Chat. And they were going through the name changes, but they seem to be quite consistent now. So I think as we look more in the future, really, we're going to see either more tools, or we're going to see more integrated within the tools that we already use. Now, generative AI is more than just ChatGPT. They're quite useful at chat functions, so chat with it and ask questions. We've got Google ChatGPT, Google Gemini, we have Microsoft Copilot. Snapchat's an interesting one, as learners are using that quite often as well. Many people are using it for search functions, to search for research papers or information. And there are specific LLMs for that, such as Perplexity. Also image generation. So we've got Stability AI, also ChatGPT, and Microsoft Copilot can all generate images. Code, these tools are quite good at coding. Now, many coders are using it already, and they use it to help them. It won't write the code always perfectly, but it will help coach them through to how to write that code. So they're having to be a bit more critical with the way they're then reviewing that code to make sure it's obviously right. Also in the writing space, we've obviously had Grammarly for a number of years, which has always used AI, but it's taken that a bit further with generative AI. Sonic and Jasper as well have entered the market. And then over on the right-hand side, we've got content creation. So people have mentioned in the slide earlier around creating presentations. Gamma is a tool that can create presentations from a prompt. So please create me a presentation on humans interacting with computers, for example, and it will create a presentation for you. Again, limited. It's a good starting place. You would need to change that for your learners and for the lesson you're teaching against the lesson plan, for example. But they're certainly content producing, they're certainly helping. I mentioned a second ago actually around the number of tools such as ChatGPT and all of the numbers growing over the years, but we're seeing more and more now a real shift in focus where generative AI is introduced to tools that we already use. Canva, for example, many people use that, or even Google. You type in at the top of Google, you ask a question, what does Jisc do? And it's using Google Gemini to return a response. And then underneath you get the traditional search and information that you would then have to click through. So it's quite interesting to see where generative AI is now becoming more integrated into other tools. Now, the capabilities of generative AI, so we're going to focus now on generative AI rather than AI. Generative AI will write plausible sounding text on any topic. It will generate answers to a range of questions, including coding, maths type problems, and multiple choice. It's getting increasingly accurate with each sophisticated release. Now, there are faults with it, and it will make mistakes, but it's becoming more accurate because that's a useful tool. It will generate unique text each time you use it. So if two of you were sat next to each other and you typed in the same prompt, please tell me, give me an idea of what I should do at the weekend. It will give people different responses each time. So it won't just give the same content each time. It's great with a wide range of text like summarization or proofreading. It's useful for certain tasks, not for everything, but it's finding what works for you, I suppose. Now, it does have limitations. I've mentioned this. It can and often does generate plausible but incorrect information. It has no way of knowing whether the information that it generates is correct or not. So you could say, as I say, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then it doesn't know if Wednesday is the third day in that pattern. It only knows from the pattern. It also includes false references and can make false claims about its own capability. So if, for example, you had an approved brief and you had approved students' work and you were allowed to put it into an AI tool, and you said, did you write this text? It could say yes, but it could also say no. It has no way of knowing. It's just looking for a plausible answer. So we can't always trust it. We have to use our human intelligence and just think, actually, is that right? Is that wrong? But depending on the AI tool, they may not have up-to-date information as well. So it's really about, if we're using a tool and we're asking questions around, have you written this? It's saying yes because that's a plausible answer, but actually questioning that. Thinking back to our days of information literacy and media literacy and questioning some headlines perhaps, or questioning some news articles, which we've done for many years, it's the same when we're using these tools. There are concerns as well around the use of them. It can and does produce bias output. Based on the data it's been trained on, which is largely Western sources, so the internet, it can produce bias output, culturally and politically insensitive output. It can then also generate unacceptable output. So some tools under 18s can't use. Now, I know many are under 18s now are allowed to use a number of them. Google Gemini, for example. Microsoft Copilot have announced, we're waiting for the date, that they're going to make a safeguarded rail version of Microsoft Copilot, so 13 plus can use. I think they can already use it actually under their personal accounts, but under the educational account at the moment, they can't. So that'll be coming out this summer, they've announced. Also, there's concerns around data security. Policies vary between each tool, so some will store different data, some won't, for example, so it's really using the approved tools. There's also environmental impacts, which we're going to have a look at in a second, but there's concerns around the human impact. So during the training of these tools, people had to sit there and look at this content. Now, we know it can generate unacceptable outputs, so they've had to review that and they've potentially have to see that as well. So there's been impact around that. And then ownership of the training material, because they've taken all the data and popped it in, and there's concerns around, are those people who've created those images been paid, for example? But it's different in each country as well. And there's also a danger of inequality here. We've already seen that with the digital divide, with access to the internet. Well, this is actually introducing another level of that as well, because students who then can afford the paid for models, for example, will have a better experience with it. It will return more useful results. It will have more up-to-date data and so on. So there's certainly a number of concerns around with it. Talking about the environmental, because this has been quite hot press over the last, say, 6 to 9 months, there's these news articles coming out here. So the ugly truth behind ChatGPT and guzzling resources and the planet eating rates. We've actually got some very up-to-date slides, which are coming out to you first as well, around the environmental impacts and concerns, as people are concerned with the amount of energy that it uses. Generative AI obviously does require significant resources across the entire life cycle. So the energy it uses, the water to keep the data centers cool, the carbon emissions, the materials that are used for the data centers, for example, the concern around how large this has grown so quickly with these data centers, with people using it. And also there's been definitely a lack of transparency from the big providers, so ChatGPT, Microsoft, around their actual data. So there's certainly concerns around this. So we've been doing some research. Catherine in our team has done some excellent blogs around this, but found some plausible data. So we don't know if this is 100% correct, but quite a bit of research has gone into this. So it estimates, as we say, that this is plausible, but to put it into numbers and some context, which I think people have been calling for a while, Andy Maisie has put together this table here to put it into reality kind of thing. And he suggests from all the research that he's carried out is that ChatGPT, say you query with it, and say you query it per day, per query, you are using 0.0.029 kilowatts hours. And then water-wise, how much water is being used to complete that task? 30 millilitres. So the carbon emission is 0.69 grams of CO2. Now, to compare it to something like watching Netflix, so streaming 1 hour, streaming uses quite a bit of energy in comparison to the old days of DVDs and videos and things like that. But streaming music is the same, it's quite high energy impact in comparison to downloading it and saving it on your device. But actually, streaming an hour of Netflix has a larger kilowatt per hour with 77 kilowatts per hour, 0.01. The water used is 2 to 12 litres and 34 grams of CO2. Now, even Googling, that will obviously have an energy impact. But then we have to switch it and think about as well, if we're using one of these tools to maybe proofread, students certainly will use it for proofreading at maybe 3 a.m. in the morning. We have to then consider, actually, traditionally, they would have probably got on a bus or driven into a college campus, then met with somebody else to then proofread through their work, and then hopefully they're learning through that process as well. They usually do. But then there's an energy impact of that for them to go in and have a human do it. They've got food, they need to eat water, they need to drink. So there's always a balance in these things. So what we would say is, if you're going to create, say, an image, think about does that image already exist? Image generation uses quite a bit more energy than, say, just a normal text query chatting for an answer. So if you're going to create an image of a cat, does that image already exist? Well, perhaps I'll already use that image, which is available on the internet or available through free sources. So we'd say use it responsibly. It's rather than using it irresponsibly and thinking I'll just create another one. But at the end of the day, there is an impact to everything, but it's useful to have some of these numbers. Looking forward around the energy usage, alternative energy sources to power AI energy demand is certainly needed. Technological developments as well, such as Google TPU and the age of inference. There's interesting articles around that as well. We'll put those in the chat as well. I think we need to have initiatives in collaboration, certainly between these big providers. And there's certainly potential for AI and the climate action and sustainability. So we're also seeing positive sides from generative AI, where it's been able to save energy, analyze data a lot quicker than a human can, using a lot less energy to then make a decision to save energy. So, for example, turning the lights off on an automatic light sensor across an entire building, that can save energy. So there are swings and roundabouts. But I certainly think this has increased awareness about digital sustainability, certainly where we send lots of emails, where we post on social media, thinking actually, has this got an impact on the environment by me sharing or clicking on there as well? So certainly want to think about, but just to be aware of it. Now, thinking on the different topic really now around, are we prepared for AI and what impact that will have on the job market? Certainly on first jobs as well, for when our learners leave and go into the workplace. So this research shows that actually it's not evenly distributed, the predictions for 2030. Now, this is from the DFE in England, but they predicted that the finance insurance industry will be impacted by AI quite a bit more than if we look at the bottom, we've got accommodation and food services. They're not going to be impacted as much. So it's not evenly distributed, but thinking about the skills that we're going to need and also prepare our learners to have, slightly it does change, especially as there's quite often they're saying to us at the moment, those first jobs that they go into where they would be doing administration or learning, for example, in law and doing quite a bit of admin, those jobs are now changing because generative AI can do a lot of that back work already. So thinking about the skills that they need, there's some predictions here. That workers will need to constantly gain new skills throughout their work life. Now, I don't think that's anything new. I don't think many people have got into the same job when they were 18 and they've stayed in until retirement. I don't think that's anything new, but certainly with generative AI, it does change things quite a bit more rapidly. 82% of leaders say their employees need new skills to be prepared for the growth in AI. Humans need to excel at things that AI can't do, and that means being more creative, critical thinking, and less memorization, because it can do those bits for us, the memorization side. New skills and ways of working, analytical judgment, flexibility, and emotional intelligence are top of the skills the leaders believe are essential for employees to have in an AI-powered future. And there's more focus on interest in having people with analytical and creativity skills, but it's also very important for leadership to have social influence and ability to work with other people. The traits that make us human. So those are the things that AI can't do. Essentially, AI can proofread a document. It can give us an idea about how we can solve this problem, but it's not going to do those. It hasn't got that empathetic view or the human nuances that we know when we're working together. So it's quite interesting to see these predictions. And then next, we're thinking about our own priorities. I think for a number of years, I've heard this phrase, work smarter, not harder. Always hear it, you always kind of get, okay, right, I'm trying to work as smart as I can. But actually, they're predicting that AI can help deliver some of these. It's down to us as individuals, I suppose, to save time. For example, be able to learn a new skill twice as fast, cutting meetings in half. Now, I use AI all the time. I'm not certainly seeing this on everything, but on certain areas I am. Work smarter, I'm able to work a lot quicker in certain areas for sure. End the information overload, right? Having to absorb every single piece of information, it can summarize. Rather than having to read 54-page PDF documents about funding, I could summarize it and I can then compare it to last year's funding PDF, for example. Banish busy work, so outsourcing my busy work with the admin side of things. Solving the search, certainly ChatGPT, Microsoft Copilot, and Google Gemini are very good at searching and summarizing information. Unleash creativity, so this might be how we deliver content as well. It might be able to help in respect with those sorts of tasks as well. So it depends on you and your priorities. Now, this year and last year, we've run a student survey. Well, no, we've actually more than that. We've met with over 200 students across the country to speak to them about their views about generative AI and how they're using it. We've just published recently our findings from this year. But we found that students are quite often in the green over on the left-hand side, using it as a research tool to explore concepts. Now, at the bottom here, you can see more acceptable with a question mark, and then on the right, you can see less acceptable with a question mark. Because actually it's down to the user and it's down to the task. Some tasks may suit sometimes, but not other times. Some students are using it to get started, create structures to assessments, proofreading, getting feedback. But then in the yellow, where we're moving over now into the middle, translation. Many students are using it for translation, but they're aware that actually it can make mistakes. They're not trusting it wholeheartedly. They're not trusting that black and white text. They are aware that it can make complete mistakes with it, but they're still using it. Rewriting sections they'd know would be appropriate, and creating images just because of the environmental impact on that side. Then over in the orange here, we've got iterate and discuss and create assignments. So they know that they're quite concerned around plagiarism, and they're concerned around knowing what they're allowed to do and what they're not allowed to do with generative AI. They are very aware that just typing in a single prompt to say, please create this, answer this assignment, they are fully aware that that's not right. So that's why that's over in the red side. We've got just pasting the question, single basic prompt. So learners are calling for what are they allowed to use it for? What are they not allowed to use it for? I mean, many are using it for researching and finding out, but then they're going away and then they're writing out themselves. It's those sorts of things. Certainly, generative AI has put a big question mark around on assessment. We're running another session I'll talk to you later on about looking at assessment in further education as well in a couple of weeks, and we've got a whole program around that as well. So a few questions to consider really, I think, from this segment. How do you think AI will impact the workforce? It's something to really think about, I think, with our learners leaving and going into the workplace. How do you think AI will impact learners entering the workforce? I think in particular for those first jobs. And then what key literacies do you think learners need to develop? So they need to develop their AI literacy for sure, really, going into the workplace. But it also is that media literacy, knowing what's fake news and information. Also digital literacy, able to understand and analyze what the chatbots are producing for them. But I perhaps think that AI has picked this up. I think personally, my background is teaching, and we had digital literacy and we had information literacy, but perhaps it was a little bit too embedded in the curriculum that the students may not have realized it was part of it. So perhaps this is bringing it to the surface so we can actually have those discussions around real information, not fake news and all those sorts of things. So thinking about AI now, how do we use it, especially as we've seen people who are going to get started. I'm going to talk to you just about a few around prompting now. And I've got this quote here. Just like a chef combines ingredients to create a delicious dish, you combine words to get the best response. So it's really important around the prompting and what we type in to ask. The right prompt leads to more accurate and relevant and useful content generation. The way I think about this is, if I was going to a coffee shop now and I asked for coffee, they're going to look at me and say, what would you like? Would you like a mocha, espresso? What would you like? Would you like soy latte? What? So it's around my communication when I first ask what I would like. So it's the same when we're chatting with ChatGPT or Microsoft Copilot. We have to think about what we're going to ask. It's the same with humans. We ask in that way. So here I've got an example of a basic prompt and then a better prompt. So the basic prompt in the blue at the top. Give me an outline of a session about getting the most from Microsoft Copilot. So I'm going to quickly demonstrate this and we're going to review the results together. So I've got this bit like Blue Peter, but I've got it pre-prepared. Give me an outline of a session about getting the most from Microsoft Copilot. So I'm using the educational license that I have. So I've entered that in there. Just to say, in Copilot, you can also use speech to text as well. So I could speak it and then input it as well. But I'm just going to run that. So here we are. It's quite quickly generating that. Let's go back up to the top and I'll zoom in slightly so hopefully you can see a bit better. So getting the most from Microsoft Copilot, boosting productivity with AI. It's made that assumption, yeah, from what I've typed in. Duration, it's made an assumption around 60 to 90 minutes because I haven't given that, but it's given me a suggestion. It's given me 4 learning objectives. Now it's made assumptions around what I'm going to use. We've got a welcome, 5 minutes, icebreaker. Then we've got what is Microsoft Copilot. We've got a suggestion around live demos, Word, Excel, Outlook, PowerPoint. Now, interestingly, it hasn't actually asked me about which version of Copilot I have there. Interactive activity, participants write a test prompts, and so on. Now, if I jump back over to the presentation, a better prompt would be, give me an outline of a session about getting the most from Microsoft Copilot. The audience are people working in education, so I'm trying to give it a bit of context here, who have never used Microsoft Copilot. And then I've asked, I want the session to be fun and informative. It should last for 60 minutes, so I'm giving it a bit of guardrail there. I'd like it within 60 minutes. And it's being run online to around 200 people. So I'm going to compare this one now. So I'm going to scroll down to the bottom and I'm just going to copy it in, but give me an outline of a session about getting the most from Microsoft Copilot. The audience people in working in education who've never used Microsoft Copilot before. I want the session to be fun and informative and it should last for 60 minutes. So I've given it a bit more context. Let's see how this changes its response. So it's just summarizing back to me what I've asked for. It's given me a title, Supercharge Your Teacher with Microsoft Copilot, a Beginner's Guide. Now, it's up to me whether I use that title. I don't like that title, but it's up to you. Duration, 60 minutes, and it's given me 4 goals here, so 4 objectives. Understand what Microsoft Copilot is. And I think in my prompt, I should have perhaps said which version of Copilot I would like, because that would then return it a bit better. So quick poll, what would you use it for? Brief introduction, light headings, simple explanation. Okay, so now it's like having an AI teaching assistant and Word and Excel more. It's now related it to education. It's given me a few suggestions around the context that I would like. So Copilot in action for educators. We've got draft a lesson plan. If I compare that, hopefully I won't go too fast to miss the point. The one it gave me earlier on was drafting reports and summarizing. So it's really trying to home in on the context I've given it. So this is where prompting is quite important because you'll get better results when you ask for a bit more information. Now, As we can see, it's given us top tips, pitfalls, thinking about students. It's given me a few ideas there, ideas as well for optional extras. So it's a bit, the context there really helped, as you can see, with what it was going to return. Now, many people are liking conversation, prefer to have an iterative conversation, so a chat. That's why ChatGPT is called chat. So you don't have to get it right first time with your first prompt. Some people prefer a collaborative approach where you're asking 5, 6, 7 multiple prompts within there. So iterating to get to the final answer, that's absolutely fine. You could also ask it to shorten the responses. You can ask it to elaborate. You can ask for it to please write it in this tone of voice. It will default quite often to American English. On Copilot, it did let me change my settings to UK English. However, it seems to revert back to American. So I could ask, please write this in UK English. But always, this key bullet point here is review the outputs. Don't trust it. Remember, we looked at the plausible. It can come up with an answer. It doesn't know if it's right or wrong. Don't just take it as black and white. Now, all these tools as well, ChatGPT, Microsoft Copilot, they provide the sources now, which is much better. So if you're asking and you're researching for information, do click on them and go and check those sources, because they're pulling everything from all over the internet and they don't know what's good from the internet or bad from the internet. So do go and review the sources. And then they'll all pretty much have as well, AI generated content may be incorrect. They're highlighting to the user saying, look, this might not be right. If you are using Copilot, just to say the 1 of 30 is each chat you get 30 questions. That may update in time, but that's so it can stay on point when you're asking multiple questions within the same chat window. So a little bit of a longer example now, and this is one that I quite like and use all the time. Give me feedback on this text. Don't make the corrections, just tell me about the issues. So, oh, this switched there. So I've got some text now, and I'm going to put this prompt in, and I'm going to ask it, Microsoft Copilot, to review this for me. So I'm going to start a new chat, and I've got this prompt which says, give me feedback on this text, don't make corrections, just tell me about the audience, the issues is for a non-technical audience. So that's my prompt. Now I'm going to copy and paste in some text that I wrote a good while ago. And this is about the AI literacy offering that I've got, which run online, and their webinars and training webinars that run. But this was for our set at the beginning of last year, actually. So I just got this text. With the ever-changing world of AI, it's difficult to keep on top. I've deliberately got some mistakes in here, but I just want to show you how this will go. So give me feedback. Myself, I learn best from this, almost like a mentor. I don't want it to change my text. I want it to give me, improve the structure for me. So quite quickly, it's said spelling word choice, ever-changing world of AI seems like a typo or a misunderstood word. Okay, I might not agree with everything here. Clarity and flow, we'll look at AI tools such as ChatGPT and look. Is repetitive, so I might need to think about the repetitiveness of this. Since the audience is non-technical, it might help explaining what tools like ChatGPT and Gemini are used for. Good idea. Structure and emphasis, the list of topics of a webinar series is informative, but could benefit from a clearer separation and emphasis. And then the tone is informative, but could be more engaging. So quite a useful suggestion there. Really just thinking about getting ideas rather than trusting it completely. It's just what I can use it for. I'm going to have another example as well now, and this is more around obviously teaching and learning. And in this example, I'd like to just create some resources. Tomorrow, we've got lots of demos around this, around how to use these and prompts and things like that. But for this one, hi, I'm teaching a geography lesson about Italy. Can you give me a short summary of the key facts of the Leaning Tower of Pisa? So I'm going to start it again using Microsoft Copilot. I'm going to go and grab my that prompt. I'm going to copy and paste it in just because of time. Hi there, I'm teaching a geography lesson about Italy. Can you give me some short summary about the Leaning Tower of Pisa? So I'm researching at this point. My background is teaching, as I say, and the amount of times I had something that I'd never taught before, or my background was computing, so it was brand new, as it were. So I'd have to go and research before I could teach the lesson as it was on the spec. But we've got here some key facts. So great, okay, would I trust all of these? Possibly not. Hopefully I would know a lot of the answers, but I can go and look at the links at the bottom and the sources here. We can see the one, for example, and where it's pulled it from. So we've got a number there. Then I know that's too much information for my presentation. I just want some bullet points. So I'm going to ask, please summarize that into 4 key bullet points for a presentation. There's too much information for my PowerPoint. So quite quickly, here are the 4 key points: historic landmarks, famous tilt, engineering marvel, cultural icon. I would say here, now I've got here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 points. If I had 50 bullet points there and I asked it to summarize that to 4 key bullet points, like anything in life, it will pull out quite a bit of information. It has no way of knowing which is the 4 most important. So I'd be cautious when you do use things like 4 or numbers within it of how many you ask for, because it will shorten it too much and it might pull out some key information. It's the same as if we did it as humans, wouldn't it? But again, I've got that, and I've got my 4 bullet points now that I could put onto my PowerPoint. If I'm happy with that, I could copy and paste that in, or I could even say shorter, please, if it's too long. I could ask for it in UK English as well, if there's any Americanized coming in there with Zs, for example. And we've got those really 4 short points. Now, I've got my PowerPoint. I've got some research, so I'm aware of the information that I'm going to be talking about in class. I could then ask a prompt now. Could you create a written assignment task based on this? I want it to take them around 1 hour. My students are around 16 years old. So I've got my PowerPoint going, and now I'd like to think about some assessment tasks. So quite quickly, again, whether I use this or not, and whether it hits my specification is up to me as the user. Explore the history, structure, significance. We've got a task. Write a short report, 300 to 400 words. It's even given them instructions for the learner as well, and then the due date as well. It's saying in brackets, make sure we put that in there. So we've got that really as well within there. So these are just a few ideas that we could have. We could then ask for a different type of assessment. Could you create 5 multiple choice questions? Multiple choice questions based on the information about this topic, and provide the answers with feedback. We've used tools like Kahoot for a number of years, or forms, but actually it takes time to think of the questions that we're going to ask. So in this example, when did the construction of Leaning Tower of Pisa begin? It's given me correct answers, and then it's given me the correct answer and some feedback. So we've got 5 multiple choice questions. Quite a few people are doing this in their lessons where they're thinking, goodness me, I need to stretch and challenge those 2 learners over there. How can I do that? Or they're doing it to give them ideas for assessments. So quite a few use cases here around what you can use it for. Tomorrow we'll dig deeper into them as well. But just to also show one last point in this, ChatGPT and Copilot and Google Gemini can all do this. Can you create a table showing the average temperatures in Pisa each month? They can create tables from data that they can find. Again, we'd need to review it, but let's look if it's plausible in the table that it creates. So I want to create a nice quick table of the temperatures throughout the year, and it's done that quite quickly. So January through to December, we've got the average high and then the average low. Again, that would be something that would take me quite a bit of time, longer than this would take to create. I could then ask for it to be in an Excel file, download it and input it into my PowerPoint, for example. It's just a few ideas and use cases. Excellent. So thinking now, we'll move on now. We've got more demos tomorrow, so please do come along to that if you can. But we've got here, oh, there we go. Thinking about how we can use it in our role, because it is different for each person. It is different how we use it. Consider what aspects in your work could enhance your work or be made easier. So for me, it's quite often around design and creating videos, because I don't like doing that very much, but I have to. So I use it for ideas, and then it really helps me out. So think about what tasks are repetitive in your job within the administration side. What kind of tasks could you do that could be done with the help of AI? Or what projects could you use AI to help organise or get started with? Just giving plans. Maybe you've got probably at this time of the year, it's planning for next year, and thinking about all the internal verification. Let's plan out those dates. What could I use it for to plan out those dates? Giving me suggestions, or giving me suggestions around, I've got this group, this learners, I'm teaching them on Friday afternoon, and we're talking about maths. They're not going to like it. I need some ideas, because otherwise I'm just going to go back to my standard teaching methods. I need to pick up and add variety into my lesson. How am I going to do that? It's great with ideas. Whether we use them or not, it's up to us. But AI is quite good, generative AI, at creating tables, as we saw. Analysing text, you can it will analyse and can make suggestions. Summarising large chunks of information. You can also ask it to create alt text, alternative text to images quite quickly. Now, again, you'd always review it to make sure it's correct with the image. Translation, as I said, many learners are using it for that, and then also generating images. So we saw this table earlier on for learners. This is one for staff. And again, you may be at different points on this. You may be at one day in the green over here and another day not thinking more over to the red. So many people are saying when we've spoken to staff, they're using it for researching, again, same as students, exploring concepts, getting started, translation, getting feedback, but they're also using it for basic emails. Now, the importance really there is to maybe help you with rewording and a basic email, but also checking it and making sure it does say what you want it to say. As at the end of the day, if you press send and it's got your name on that email, it's coming from you. Translations as well. But then perhaps over in the less acceptable would be feedback on colleagues' work. Perhaps where somebody's asked you, can you review this lesson or can you review this content I'm going to push out? That probably they're asking you for a reason. So, you might ask it to review the grammar and the spelling and the punctuation, but you're still going to probably sit down and do that task because they're asking you for that. Responding to sensitive emails, probably not so appropriate because it may come up with something that isn't really suitable. Marking work without human oversight. So we're actually running a pilot, I think next year it'll be, or the academic year, looking at, we're seeing changes in the marking work area for generative AI. But we've got here would be less acceptable marking work without human oversight. So where we just trust an AI chatbot or a tool to give the grade and that is it. That would not be acceptable. Generating feedback and giving us ideas around what feedback we would give to, say, 60 learners who've all handed in their assignments might be quite a useful task and a useful tool, but not solely marking a piece of work and giving that grade. We still need human oversight over marking, don't we? And then critical work like health and safety. For example, if you're going to take your students on a trip and you're taking them on a canoeing trip and you need to create a risk assessment and think about the health and safety, sure, you could ask ChatGPT to complete that risk assessment for you. I know finding time to do that is quite difficult sometimes, but actually ChatGPT will only know the Health and Safety Act. They will only know the legislation. They won't know the nuances of your learners. They won't know the nuances of the river you're taking the students down on the canoeing trip. They're not going to know all those details. It's not going to know all those details. So critical work like health and safety risk assessments, if it was designed for a human to do, perhaps that should stay as a human within the task. But you might use it, as I say, for proofreading or helping you structure the risk assessment and what you're writing down. But at the end of the day, I think there's certain tasks that we still need us to be involved with. So I mentioned earlier on around checking the sources. Do check the sources when it's generated from your prompt. Always check, click off and go and check it. For example, here, who is the UK current education secretary? Out of date there, but you could check the sources. Always evaluate the outputs. Remember, it can generate content that's out of date. The information is incorrect. It often gets confused as well between similar entities. So, for example, we have a Cardiff in South Wales in South Wales in the UK, but there's also a Cardiff in New South Wales in Australia, and it will get confused. So we often have to give it within the prompt, please refer to the Cardiff in South Wales in the UK rather than one in Australia. Misunderstanding your query. It's the same as humans. If we're asking questions, I don't quite understand that question. It can misunderstand your query. It can make incorrect assumptions as well with the content. This happened to my friend. She was writing her wedding invitations and it had assumed that her wedding had already taken place. So the language that it used had been kind of, thank you for coming along to my wedding, rather than please come along. And then bias, certainly because that training data, all the data it has within it, it can contain bias information and biased data. Bear in mind it's based on Western data, mostly from the internet, as in that's what's available. So it's mirroring what information it has from the data within that. And it can give unbalanced views. It doesn't necessarily have all the information. So be aware of it and make your critical judgment and really think about, is this black and white text that's been generated or this image correct, or is there showing any bias in there? There is improvements in that space. Previously, you would ask it for who is this? Give me an image of 4 nurses, and it would mostly be female. Whereas now it's being a bit better at that, but there still certainly is bias in there. So ideas to try: get started. Maybe write a newsletter or an email. Maybe start with lesson introductions. Provide an introduction to a lesson. Explore topics that you don't know much about, or get ideas around what you might use it for. Problem solving, it's quite good as well, coming up with debate tasks. So we've got a number of tasks here that you could potentially use it for. Lesson planning, syllabus creation, professional development planning, data analysis, rubric creation, getting icebreakers. That was one I always used to struggle with because I did it once a year, the beginning of the academic year, and think, God, what did I have last year? So yeah, maybe a few ideas around tasks that you don't do actually too often that come along. Emails as well on communications, class contracts and agreements. Just a few ideas to try out. So the idea really is then to kind of improve or to understand how to use AI. I think is just start using it, try and find time to play with it, think about things that you would like to try, explore what it's good at and then not so good at. One thing I would say that it may be things that you find that it's not so good at right now. Think about your prompting, but also perhaps revisit it in 6 months' time, as these tools are ever changing with their capabilities. So something 6 months ago that it wasn't very good at might be quite good at now. I mentioned earlier on around the learning modules. I'll pop them in the chat as well, the links to those in a second. We also have 2 AI in education community groups. So the further education one, I'm going to pop the link to that in the chat, which you will have access to after the session as well. If you'd like to join up, we meet once a month usually and talk all things AI across further education. So people from many institutions come along to that, and it will start up now in the new year and in the autumn. So over to questions. Do we have any questions that have been coming up in the chat? And I will pop those links in as well.